When we think about a refugee's journey, we often focus on the big moments, the escape, the resettlement. We see it as the end of one story and the start of a whole new one. But what if the past isn't something you can just leave behind? What if it's a camp that you carry with you always? Today, we're going to dive into that powerful idea, all through the words of a poet who actually lived.
This one line, wow, it's from a poem by a former refugee, and it is the absolute key to everything we're talking about. It's this haunting idea that even when the buildings are torn down and the fences are gone, the experience, the trauma, that camp is never really over. So, the poem we're looking at paints this incredibly vivid picture of two different camps. There's the one that was on a map, a real place. And then there's the other one, the one that only exists in the mind. It's a really profound look at that lasting echo of displacement, long after someone has supposedly found a new, safe home. Okay, so to really get this poem, we have to understand the history that created it. The author is a Bhutanese refugee. Back in the early 1990s, over 100,000 Nepali-speaking citizens were forced out of Bhutan. They ended up in refugee camps in Nepal, where a lot of them lived for almost 20 years before finally being resettled in countries all over the world. The poet's name is Rupesh Dhungana. He lived in one of those camps, Goldhap camp, and he was eventually resettled in Canada. So his words, they aren't just an observation. This is a testimony, and it's born from decades of his own lived experience.
And the real power of the poem comes from this central contrast. On one hand, you have the physical camp, Goldhap. He describes it as just gone, demolished, the soil, the paths all erased. It's a place they physically left. But then there's the internal camp, the one made of memory. That one is carried forever. It's haunted, and it's a place that never, ever leaves.
And that brings us to the poem's next big theme, distance. The poem is just wrestling with this immense separation, and not just in miles, but in an experience that now divides the people who were resettled from the life and the people they had to leave behind. This line just keeps coming back in the poem, again and again, kind of like a sad chorus. It's this constant, painful reminder of the physical impossibility of going back, of this vast ocean that now sits between their present life and their entire past. The poem also has this really subtle hint of guilt. It suggests that the ones who were resettled, the educated and clever, as he puts it, were the ones who found a way out. And this, well, it created a whole new kind of division, fracturing a community that had once shared the exact same fate inside the camp. Okay, so now the poem takes a much darker, much more haunting turn. It reveals that the demolished camp, the one where people lived, that's not the only one that was left behind. There's another one, a much more permanent one. And this is just a chilling reality the poem lays bare. Right there in the jungle, next to where Goldhap camp used to be, another camp is still there, a graveyard filled with thousands of people who died during those years in exile. While the living got to leave, the dead had to stay. Yeah, the poem doesn't treat these graves as some kind of peaceful final resting place. No. Instead, it gives us this absolutely chilling image. The people buried there, they're waking up. They're waking up and they're looking for the ones who left. I mean, it's the perfect picture of what it means to be haunted, right? The feeling that your past isn't just a memory, but it's an active, living thing that's calling out to you. And these aren't just nameless, faceless spirits. The poem is painfully specific about who they are. They are their sick mothers and fathers, their brothers and sisters. They are the innocent and the wronged. They are family, their friends and neighbors whose stories just ended right there in that jungle soil. And there's that line again. The dead are calling out. They're searching. But the living are completely helpless, separated by this impossible distance. It's a cry of sorrow, but also of just profound helplessness. So this haunting from the outside, from the ghosts, it leads directly to a haunting from within. The poem shifts to explore what it's like to be a survivor, that deep, complicated burden of trying to build a new life when it's built on a foundation of so much loss. And this brings us to what might be the poem's most gut-wrenching question. I mean, how can you celebrate a new life, a new beginning, when the people you loved most are buried in a forgotten jungle thousands and thousands of miles away? The poem makes this pain so real by talking about specific cultural traditions. Like, how can you possibly celebrate Bai Tika, this festival that's all about honoring the bond with your brother, when your own brother's body is lying in that camp of the dead? How can you observe Tej, a celebration of sisterhood, knowing your sister is buried there? For the survivors, these moments that should be full of joy become sources of this deep, private pain. And this pain is made even worse by another fear, the fear that even the physical proof of their loved ones is just vanishing, that the jungle will swallow the graves, termites will turn bone into dust, and the wind will just scatter it all. Memory becomes the only tombstone they have left. But, after all of this grief and all this distance, the poem doesn't just end in despair. It manages to find a different kind of resolution, a connection that not even death or an ocean can break. The poem accepts a really stark reality. A physical reunion with the people left in those graves, it's impossible. And the living know that they will die too, but they won't be buried next to their family. Their final resting place will also be across the seven seas. And right here, the poem offers its beautiful, heartbreaking answer. The physical connection is gone, forever. But the spiritual one, the bond between souls, that can never be broken. This is the promise that the resettled make to the dead. Even though their bodies are separated by entire oceans, their hearts and souls are still connected. Remembering becomes its own kind of reunion, a promise that they will never, ever be forgotten. The poem uses its refrain one last time, but now the meaning has totally changed. It's not just a statement of tragic separation anymore. Now, it's the very reason that spiritual bond is so important. It's because they are so far apart that the connection of the soul has to be that strong. And so we're left with this really powerful question. Resettlement might be the end of the physical journey, but for those who carry a camp of memory inside them, the journey of dealing with the past, well, maybe that's never truly over.